Hello everyone! So today, we will be learning about issues and concerns of people around the world. Also, we will talk about what is globalization. So perhaps you have heard this word before, but what exactly is globalization? Let's all find out.
This morning you woke up and put on a polo shirt that read Made in China on the inside tag. You then went to your garage and got in a car that had parts that were manufactured in all parts of the world. You drove that car to the grocery store where you bought grapes that were grown in Chile, sugar from Jamaica, and curry from India. You did all this because of globalization.
What is globalization? It is the speed up of movements and exchanges of human beings, goods and services, capital, technologies, or cultural practices all over the world. Globalization has accelerated since the 18th century due to the advances in transportation and communications technology. But the term gained popularity after the Cold War in the early 1990s as these cooperative arrangements shape modern everyday life.
And so here are the characteristics of globalization. Globalization initiates growth and interconnectivity of various sectors across nations. Its essential features include international trade, capital market flows, diffusion of technology, liberalization, learning, and production advantage.
Some principal forms: international trade. An increasing share of spending on goods and services is devoted to imports, and increasing shares of what countries produce is sold as exports. The importance of the international trade lies at the root of the country's economy. In the constant changing of business, market countries are no more independent than ever under partners for exporting and importing, thereby keeping the home's country's economy afloat and healthy. Capital market flows. In many countries, particularly in the developed world, investors have increasingly diversified their portfolios into include foreign financial assets such as international bond stock. Funds and borrowers have increasingly turned to foreign sources of funds. Capital market flow also include in remittances from migration, which typically flow from industrialized to less industrialized countries. Diffusion of technology. Localities being connected with the world by breaking national boundaries for a game of links between one society and another, and between one country and another, through international transmission of knowledge, literature, technology, culture, and information. Liberalization. Freedom of business people or industrialists to establish a business. Learning. Globalization opened doors for abundant knowledge and experiences. Production and advantage. It increases employment opportunities in the country.
Here are some examples of globalization.
The first one is intergovernmental organization. Globalization has made it possible for international organizations to be created through treaties between many different countries. For examples, include the European Union, the United Nations, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization, or WTO, and the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. Second is intergovernment treaties. Many governments across the world that engage in treaties of trade policies to make it easier for international investment and trade. These treaties, called free trade agreements, include the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, and the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or CETA. The last one is multinational corporations. A multinational corporation is an organization that does business in many different countries. Globalization is the reason that multinational business exists. For example, globalization allows major corporations to sell their products to Mexico, Europe, and China.
Manfred B. Steger, a professor of political sciences at the University of Hawaii Manoa and senior advisor on international education and globalization to the Dean of Social Sciences. He is also affiliated with the Globalization and Culture Program and MRIT University's Global Cities Research Institute.
What is globalization according to Manfred B. Steger? Globalization refers to the expansion and intensification of social relations and consciousness across world time and world space. It is a multidimensional phenomenon involving economics, politics, culture, ideology, environment, and technology.
According to Andrew Haywood, globalization is the emergence of a complex web of interconnectedness that means that our lives are increasingly shaped by events that occur and decisions that are made at a great distance from us. Distinctions are commonly drawn between economic globalization, cultural globalization, and political globalization.
These are the types of globalization. First, the economic globalization. What is economic globalization?
Economic globalization. The shift toward a more linked and independent world economy is referred to as economic globalization. A country's national economy might have an impact on other countries throughout the world. A capital-rich country, for example, might invest in a capital-poor country. Countries with more advanced technologies sells them to countries that don't have them. Similarly, developing countries, a natural resource are sold to developed countries that require them. As a result, economic globalization refers to the process of developing economic interdependence among nations by transferring economic resources from one to another. Economic globalization has two phases, including the globalization of markets and the globalization of production.
The second type of globalization is cultural globalization.
Cultural globalization. Cultural globalization refers to the integration of the world in terms of values, beliefs, and norms. It results in the development of global culture. Through cultural globalization, a domestic country's culture, values, and norms are remembered in global markets. Food habits, dressing, fast foods, outgoing televisions, and etc. of developed countries greatly influence the developing countries.
The third type of globalization is political globalization. It is a mutual framework in which countries exchange thoughts and ideas on how to implement and build policies, plans, and other implementations. There are discussions among nations about the construction of human right to property and human and child rights, free media, sustainable development, a decentralized government structure, and other topics.
One of the best benefits we get from political globalization is peace in terms of multilateralism. It has agent not to harm any country by flowing social, cultural, and other issues. Violating the international political ideology becomes a threat to the domestic nation. Political globalization refers to the ripple effects of continuity of political relationships between countries, setting up international organizations such as the UN, NATO, WTO, which debates and regulate international politics and trade, is also an example of this type of globalization.
Environmental globalization. Environmental globalization refers to the integration of the world in terms of addressing global environmental issues. It aims at addressing global environmental issues such as global warming, ozone layers depletion, loss of biodiversity, acid rain, and global pollution. These situations have aided in the growth of unification among nations that have reached an agreement and integration mindset. They are collaborating to protect the global ecosystem by preventing further ecological damage.
And lastly, technological globalization. Technology has brought the world even close together. Science, information communication, and entertainment technologies have all witnessed enormous advancements around the world.
Globalization is not only about trade. There is also cultural aspect to it. Through it, different cultures meet and people get to know and understand the various ways of life and accept them. Now that you know what globalization is, let's get into its impact, whether positively or negatively. Globalization enhances the student's ability to acquire and utilize knowledge. Globalization enhances the ability of learners to access, seize, adopt, and apply knowledge, to think independently, to exercise appropriate judgment, and to collaborate with others to make sense of new situations. Second, gave access to a large market. Through globalization, countries and companies have access to a bigger consumer base. Instead of only selling products in their country, a business can expand to other regions, boosting and in the process making more money. Number 3. Provides cheaper goods for consumers. Because of globalization, a lot of companies are moving to areas where their cost of production is low. They, in turn, offer cheaper products because they are not expensive to make, hence lower prices for consumers. Okay, so number 4, globalization lets countries do what they do best. For example, a country can buy cheap steel from another country instead of making its own steel. They can then focus their efforts on making other things they are good at. For example, computers, and export them to the countries they import cheap steel from. Promotes world peace and unity. Globalization brings governments together so that they can tackle common goals together. For example, due to globalization, world leaders have seen the impact of pollution and have resolved to tackle climate change together. Number 5. Leads to a better economies. With many multinations heading to Africa to top the consumer base in this part of the world, more jobs are being created, helping people in these countries get better wages and improve their standard of living. These investments by these multinationals or foreign countries also help strengthen the economies of the countries with the foreign exchange they bring. With an increased number of investors looking for investment opportunities around the globe, country economies will benefit whether they invest. Through globalization, economies of different countries are becoming more connected to one another since they depend on each other for trade. Number 7. Access to new culture. Globalization makes it easier than ever to access foreign culture, including food, movies, music, and art. This free flow of people, goods, arts, and information is the reason you can have a Thai food delivered to your apartment as you listen to your favorite Filipino or UK-based artist or stream of a Hollywood movie. The spread of technology and innovation. Many countries around the world remain constantly connected, so knowledge and technological advances travel quickly. Because knowledge also transfers so fast, this means that scientific advances made in Asia can be acquired in the United States in a matter of days. Higher standards of living across the globe. Developing nations experience an improved standard of living thanks to globalization. According to the World Bank, extreme poverty decreased by 35% since 1990. Further, the target of the first Millennium Development Goal was to cut the 1990 poverty rate in half by 2015. This was achieved by 5 years ahead of schedule in 2010. Across the globe, nearly 1.1 billion people moved out of extreme poverty since that time. The following are the negative effects of globalization. Number 1. causes environmental damage. Globalization has led to increased production for business in order to meet global demand. Increased production means more natural resources are used, and this can be used up before they are generated, leading to a negative impact on the environment. Some examples of environmental challenges are deforestation and loss of biodiversity, causes by economic specialization and infrastructure development, greenhouse gases emission, and other forms of pollution caused by increased transportation of goods, and lastly, the introduction of potentially invasive species into new environments. Unequal economic growth. While globalization tends to increase economic growth for many countries, the growth isn't equal. Richer countries often benefit more than developing countries. Number 3. Causes fluctuation and prices. Increased competition means that businesses with the best prices win. Due to competition, prices are always fluctuating. For example, a country like the US has to reduce its prices often to compete with prices for the same product coming from China. China's production costs are lower than the US, hence they can ridiculously low prices. For the US, companies reducing prices will have a negative effect on their profits, which in turn may lead to action like laying off workers.
And this is the last part, the conclusion. Globalization is the key factor for international business. This new era of globalization brings with it opportunities and also new considerations and challenges with the dynamics of a free market. Globalization grants access to the benefit from the international division of labor, technologies, international specializations, intercultural exchange, and the consumers enjoy a wider variety of products at lower prices. With globalization, there comes a higher level of thinking and strategizing. Business evolves in a new ways.